Guess who these religious leaders were preying on? The poor. What they had set up in church was an action loan, a payday loan. What's going on is Jesus is saying, look, they take advantage of people in the world, but in the church, the standards in the church should be higher morally than in the world. And he turned things over in the church. Now notice that Jesus was confrontational. He confronted the people. Amen, somebody. Because today we like preaching that is non-confrontational. Preaching that is soothing, and we want to pep talks, and most of our favorite evangelists are not gospel preachers. They are inspirational speakers or motivational speakers. For example, the most popular preacher in America today is not a preacher. He's a motivational speaker. His name is Joel Osteen. Some of you send money to Joel. And he's got a good motivational talk. Nice pep talk. And that's good. But don't call it the gospel. Let me tell you what the gospel does. The gospel confronts. The gospel makes you uncomfortable. The gospel makes you angry. Say amen, somebody. Gospel will tell you you can make it too. But the gospel also tells you, listen, you're living in sin. Get it together. Because inspirational talk or pep talks are simply, make you feel good. You can achieve it. You can do it. You can make the sale. You're in God's favor. And that's a bunch of garbage. God's favor. You know what God's favor is? God's love for me. He favors all of us. He ain't got no favorite children. Like you can bring God's favor into your life. It's not the gospel. The gospel that makes you wiggle. The reason why Jesus cleansed the temple and not the crack house. What was he cleansing? He wasn't cleansing the crack house. What Jesus was doing, he wasn't cleansing the whorehouse. He wasn't cleansing the courthouse. He wasn't cleansing the White House. He wasn't cleansing the state house. He wasn't cleansing the schoolhouse. He was cleansing the church house. Do you know why? Do you know why? Because if the church gets itself together, the church will take care of the crack house, the whorehouse, the state house, the penthouse. Say amen, somebody. He cleansed the temple. And you know why? That the people of God might be different than the people in the world. He turned over some things, cheating in the church. He turned over taking advantage of folk in the church. He turned over that day men shacking up with women they're not married to in the church. The church, there ought not to be men hitting on women who are not their wives. Or women not dressing modestly, but dressing provocatively for the purpose of trying to entice somebody. Not in the church. Church folk ought to be different. In the church, sex is between married people. And that goes from the pulpit to the back door. In the church, there should be sexual purity. In the church, you ought not to be drunk or serving alcoholic beverages at your house. Or having a glass of wine for the stomach's sake. That's what Maalox is for. Not Bud Light. You ought not have reefer stains on your fingers and lifting the morning's tithes and offerings. In the church, you should not be adorned with all kinds of pearls and earrings and rings and jewelry. I know y'all weren't going to say amen. I knew you would not say amen. But I don't care. You should not be hanging out at a casino in Vegas if you're in the church. The church, men don't sleep with men. And women don't sleep with women. You're not on the down low if you're in the church. A church, the last church that Jesus talked about was that church that has a high moral standard. Church, you ought not to be gossiping and backbiting and stabbing you in the back and smiling in your face. Talk about you like a dog. Ought not to be like that in the church. Because Jesus cleansed the temple. I have one habit. When I'm introduced to the church the first Sabbath, I stand, I tell the folk, I love all of you. There's no doctors and no garbage collectors here. Everybody's the same in my sight. I will be that way when I get here. When I leave here, I would have treated all of you the same. And I'm going to tell you one thing right now. If you come and tell me something about anybody, I'm going to call them and tell them you said. Amen, somebody? I reduced my workload 90%. Let me give you the last piece of this and then we'll bring this to a close. Micah is a prophet of justice. Micah chapter 5, in conjunction with Jesus talking about the church being a church of high moral standings. Micah is a minor prophet, not because he has a minor message, but because his book is small. The minor prophets are called minor prophets because the books are small. As a matter of fact, all of the minor prophets, all 12 of them, when you add up all the chapters in all those books, they do not even come to the amount of chapters in one book called Isaiah. So it's minor because of the number of pages in the book. Micah, he's a country preacher. But when you read the book of Micah, he's got a problem with the city. It says that in the text. He's got a problem with the city. What is Micah's problem with the city? In the city, he's got a problem with the law, judicial system. He talks about it. He's got a problem with the governmental system. And he's got a problem with the economic system. Read the book of Micah. I'm giving you a snapshot of the entire book. And then he's got another problem. His fourth problem is with the religious leaders. And then Micah begins to talk about what they have caused in Israel. And he comes now to his primary message in the book of chapter 6 and verse 8. He said, I'm going to tell you folks what you should look like, what the church should look like. You should walk humbly. What is he talking about? Walking humbly literally means you got to grow spiritually. Then he says you got to love mercy. What does it mean? He means you got to show kindness. Say amen, somebody. You got to show kindness to people in need. And then he says you got to do justice. What is he talking about? He is talking about changing the system. When he talks about justice, he's talking about the church becoming a change agent in the world. Now listen to me. If somebody gets knocked down outside, today we run outside, bandage them up, pick them up, take them to the hospital. Tomorrow another person gets knocked down. We go outside, bandage them, take them. Thursday, Friday, 7 days straight. We are being kind. We're showing mercy. But what we need is not just mercy. We need to change the system. Maybe we need a traffic light. Maybe we need a stop sign. Maybe we need to put up a sign that says, people get killed here. So what is it? Micah says, you've got to do justice. You got to live justly. You got to change the system. When I was coming up, they used to tell us we need to stay away from politics. That's why we have so few Adventist Congress people and feel so few governors. But we need to get inside of the system. A couple of weeks ago, I was preaching in Kansas City. They had a Black History celebration, and they had two preachers. They had Congressman Cleaver, who is the new Congressional Black Caucus chair. So he was the first preacher, I was the second preacher, and I sat and listened to him, and what a powerful preacher. But one of the things he said, I never forgot. He said the church has dropped the ball when it comes to leadership in the world. The church, and the Adventist church more so, let me tell you. Why? Because we are so focused on eschatology, we forget living today. Pie in the sky, in the sweet by and by. Just keep your feet on the ground while you're around. Micah says that's the duty of the church. To love mercy, to do justly, and to walk humbly with our God. The reason why these 5 times were cited is because that is the kind of church that Jesus approved of. You can't find a church, some people. I had a young lady, conclusion. A young lady, a friend of mine, went to Oakwood with us. She called me one day. She said, Jules, I'm in such and such a city. You talking? I said, so which church do you attend? She said, I haven't found a church. I said, how long you been there? 3.5 years. I said, you need to tell me you found a bank, you found a nail tech, you found a beauty parlor, you found a bank, you found a car dealer, you found a house, but you didn't find a church. You didn't find a church because it's not important to you. I'm trying to get you today to understand that Jesus got some claims on you and me to be a blessing to the world. You say amen, somebody. I love the church. I met my wife in church. I made my first date in church. I told her I'm coming to take you out tonight in church. Amen, somebody. I went and picked her up when I left church. I got 2 church children. I got a church wife. Amen, somebody. And when I die, I want them to roll me in church. I want a church preacher to preach. And I want a church choir to sing. And I want them to take me to cemetery. And I want a church preacher to say, dust to dust and ashes to ashes. Because I love this church. Because I'll be moving from the church militant to the church triumphant. I love this church. Thank God for this church. Well, let me just say to you, there are many kinds of churches. In conclusion, 2 more minutes. Many kinds of churches. Some churches are like a cruise ship. You're just having a good time. They're not serious about growing. They're not serious about development. It's a cruise ship. You just meet, eat, greet, burp, and leave. It's just a cruise ship. Then some churches are like submarines. They are invisible. They are in the water, but you can't see them. They are in the community, but they don't have any ministries. That's a submarine church. Then there's a church called a tugboat church. A tugboat church is barely making it. A bunch of cheap members. We call them God's tightwads. Wouldn't give $1 for anything. No tithe, no thanks, no praise. Then you got this worship church. They're always fighting. Deacons and preachers, folk not speaking to each other, backstabbing members. That's a worship church. Wouldn't fight the devil, wouldn't fight sin, but they're fighting each other. And then some churches are like sailboats. And a sailboat church is a church that goes with the wind. Whatever way the wind is blowing, that's where the church is going. Whatever is popular, that's what the church is doing. That's a sailboat church. But then there's a final church. It's not a cruise ship. It's not a submarine. It's not a tugboat. It's not a warboat. It's not a sailboat. It's an aircraft carrier. And you know what an aircraft carrier is? You see that plane at the back of the aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers are in the middle of the ocean, but it's a flat platform, a flat deck. And airplanes on missions fly to the aircraft carrier, and they fly in for one thing and one thing only, to get refuel. And once they get refuel, they fly back out to mission, and they come back and get refuel. Ladies and gentlemen, you come and get a little song, a little prayer, a little preaching, but you go back out, and you go back out on mission, looking unto Jesus, the author and and the finisher of our faith. And he that called you to service. Serve him with gladness. Work for him day by day. Make a difference in somebody's life. Give of your best. And then Jesus will come and he'll say, well done,